"Don't touch me." The voice cuts thin. Elijah, bright-eyed and braced like a storm siren. Chandelier light hardens, suits freeze, the nanny flinches, Vincent Hale's jaw knots. Grace hovers at the threshold, new maid, hands smelling of soap and bus diesel, hired to help a boy who refuses touch. Then the visit tilts. Elijah spirals, a dark mark blooms on his skin, and one lie fires Grace into the street. But the house keeps talking in whispers. A toy inked with a symbol, a pill bottle where lullabies live, a camera that blinks but never remembers, a hidden recording that doesn't match the story. Who hurt Elijah, and who is rewriting the evidence? Can Grace outpace a billionaire's eraser before the last truth disappears? What happened next shocked everyone and set off a chain of events no one saw coming. Stay with me, this is a story you need to hear. Before we start the story, comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from today. And if you find this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe for more. Grace rode the bus before dawn, the city still yawning awake, her bag heavy with one change of clothes and a thin scarf. She kept the locket close under her shirt, the tiny oval with a faded photo of her younger brother, Matthew, inside. She had promised herself years ago that she would always bring something that reminded her why she kept pushing. Rent, medicine, small kindnesses, those were her reasons. The locket steadied her like a small, quiet anchor. The Hale house looked different up close. It was not just big, it smelled of polished wood and something colder, order. A man in a suit opened the gate for her. Mr. Connors, the estate manager, watched with a slow, practiced gaze. He handed her a list and a badge, then pointed to the playroom by name. "You'll follow Hannah's lead. No exceptions." His voice had the soft cruelty of someone used to being obeyed. Hannah was the head nanny. She moved like she had been born inside the walls, soft shoes, softer voice. She had worked for the family for a long time. When Grace met her, Hannah's eyes were kind but tired. "He won't like strangers at first," she said, nodding toward the playroom. "He needs routine. Keep your hands to yourself unless he asks. Keep your hands to yourself." The instruction landed on Grace like cold glass. Elijah's world was a small orbit of light and sound. The playroom held a train track, stacks of picture books, and a small shelf of toys arranged with careful symmetry. On the floor, where Elijah sat, was a wooden horse no bigger than a palm. Its paint was worn, a chip missing from one ear. Elijah held it like breath, thumbs rubbing the same scratch over and over. The horse made something inside Grace go still. She had given Matthew a similar toy when they were children. He had clutched it on bad nights until he could sleep. She swallowed a memory and watched Elijah rock with his back to the room. No one moved him, no one touched him. The house had rules for touch. The rules felt like fences around a small, living thing. Vincent Hale arrived sometimes like weather, sudden, heavy, impossible to ignore. In the mornings, he spoke in sharp sentences that cleaned the air of small talk. He gave orders and expected exact returns. He believed in control. He paid for it in silence. The other staff bowed around him because that is what money trains people to do. Grace listened when Vincent asked about schedules. His eyes flicked to the playroom as if he were assessing a machine's output. He never knelt. He never asked about the wooden horse. Dr. Patel visited twice each week. He wore soft sneakers and a clinical smile. He treated Elijah like a case he wanted to solve gently. "Progress takes time," he told Hannah once, pen scratching on a clipboard. "We should try a controlled exposure touch, in short bursts with clear signals." His language sounded like a map. Grace nodded even though she did not fully understand the phrases. She watched how the staff followed the doctor's plans with the obedience of people paid to keep a delicate machine running. There were whispers among the staff that whispered away when Vincent entered. A cook named Maria shook her head once, speaking to Grace in the kitchen. "Mr. Hale doesn't have feelings," she said, ladling soup like a small prayer. "He buys solutions. But he lacks patience." Hannah's hands did the same motion day after day, straighten the rug, wipe the windows, fold the same blanket on the sofa, small rituals that made the house believe it was safe. Grace's first days were a mix of watching and learning. She learned the names of the safe chairs, the angles of the windows that didn't reflect light into Elijah's eyes, the order of the afternoon routine that, if broken, made the child shut down. She learned which words to use and which ones to leave out. "Keep your hands to yourself," she repeated under her breath, and it felt like a secret she was keeping for him. At night, when the house sighed into whisper, Grace sat in the small staff room and looked at her locket. She thought of Matthew's bright laugh and the nights she had spent humming until he slept. What if she could reach Elijah the same way? What if the chipped horse was a door and not a wall? On the third afternoon, Grace watched a small thing that made her chest tighten. Dr. Patel had packed his bag and was leaving when he paused near the playroom door. He bent down to whisper something that sounded clinical into Elijah's ear. Elijah flinched. The child's fingers tightened on the wooden horse. Then, very quickly, Dr. Patel hooked a small paper tag on the horse's tail and walked away without meeting Grace or Hannah. The tag had neat, official handwriting: "Sensory aid, do not remove, do not remove." The words felt strange there, as if even the toy carried a permit. Grace wanted to ask what the tag meant. She wanted to ask 100 questions. When did toys become labeled? Who decided the rules? Who held the keys to the small, private life of a child? But she was new, and the house needed her to be careful. She folded her hands and kept them still. That evening, before the lamps in the hallway were dimmed, she noticed, from her place by the window, a small drawer in Hannah's station left slightly open. A bottle peered out, tiny pills inside, a white label. Her name was not on the bottle. A list of instructions on the desk mentioned medication schedules and coded notes for behavioral acceptance. Grace's throat tightened. She felt a cold worry seed in her gut. Who decided what Elijah needed? Who signed the papers? Her heart kicked toward a choice she had not expected to make. She closed her eyes for a moment and felt the locket warm against her chest. She imagined Matthew's small hand inside hers. What would she do if she were there? What would you do? She wondered quietly, and the question hung like a breath in the room. The house was precise, the staff trained, the rules protective and sharp. But the chipped wooden horse lay on the floor, small and ordinary and stubborn. Somewhere in that tiny object, Grace felt a thread tied to her own past, and a possibility that maybe, just maybe, the horse could be the door to an unexpected courage. The silver tray trembled in the butler's hands when the guest's camera flashed. Conversations stalled like a string cut mid-note. Elijah's face had gone pale, then red, then smaller. He backed away from the window where light lay in a bright strip on the Persian rug. Someone laughed too loudly to cover the alarm. Grace felt the air change. She had followed the rule and stayed by the doorway. She watched Elijah's hands, thumbs working the chipped horse, because that was where his calm lived. The guest with polished shoes took 2 slow steps closer. A child reached out to touch Elijah's sleeve like a small, well-meaning moth. The child's mother said, "Oh, how sweet," and the sound hit Elijah like a wrong chord. He spun, he ran. For a second time that day, the room turned into a loud machine. Glass chimed against wood, a tray clattered. A vase toppled and cracked on the marble sill. A small boy cried. A photographer cursed. Vincent Hale moved the way storms move, fast, forehead low, voice ablaid. "Stop him," he said. Panic made the staff move like puppets. Hannah lunged. Dr. Patel called a name that sounded like an instruction. Elijah's small body crashed into a chair. Someone's forearm pressed against his shoulder. He screamed. It was not a cry of pain so much as an alarm. Hands reached in, each certain they knew what to do. Then Vincent's voice cut through everything. "Who touched him?" Grace's heart hit her ribs. She had not moved. She had not reached. She remembered the line she'd been given. "Keep your hands to yourself." She thought of the little tag on the wooden horse that said "Sensory aid, do not remove." She wanted to step forward and pick up the child. She wanted to. A guest cleared his throat and pointed. "The maid," she stepped in. He said it as if it were a fact. The sentence landed like a stone. Vincent's face went black. He walked the distance in 3 strides and faced Grace. His voice was low and lethal. "You touched him," he said. "You disobeyed instructions." Grace opened her mouth. She began. "You were told," he snapped. "We have protocols for a reason. You put my son at risk." "Not true," Hannah said, but her voice was thin. She looked at Grace like someone testing a scar. She didn't, then explain. Vincent's eyes burned. He gestured at the broken vase, the crying child, the guests frozen like taxidermy. Explain why he attacked. Explain why he reacted. Someone in the corner, Mr. Connors, held up one hand. "We will keep calm," he said, too gently to be real. His gaze slid to the staff, to the bottles in the drawer Grace had noticed, then away like someone who had no wish to be involved. A guest murmured about headlines. Another guest, with a voice soft and thin, suggested a lawsuit if the child were hurt. "Talk like that smells like a net closing." Grace's hands went cold. Her locket felt heavier against her chest. She thought of Matthew's cough last winter, the way his small body had needed help that wasn't coming from anyone wealthy. She thought of the rent notice folded in her pocket. She thought of the warning she had been given, "Don't touch," and of the way she had held out her hand the first day in the hallway. Did anyone remember that? Did anyone notice she had not taken one step toward Elijah? Vincent didn't wait for an answer. He moved as though cutting a thread. "You're dismissed." The word sounded older than law, like a king issuing exile. It echoed through the parlor. The guests shifted, some with relief, some with curiosity. "Leave now," he added, and it felt less like an instruction and more like a final sentence. Grace's throat closed. She could feel the eyes of the staff like small knives. Maria paled and looked away. Hannah's mouth pressed into a thin line. Dr. Patel murmured something about misapplied stimuli and escalation, words that wrapped around Grace like rope. "Not true," Grace said, short, quick, a single punch of a sentence. "I didn't touch him." Vincent turned on her. "Then tell me why he has a mark on his arm." He pointed. Elijah's sleeve had ridden up. There, faint but there, a small red line like a bruise ran across the child's forearm. The room inhaled. A guest moved to the child and said, "Who did that?" in a voice meant to be kind, but which felt like an accusation. Grace's mind skidded. She had seen no mark earlier. She had watched the wooden horse, the tag, the routines. She had not seen any bruises. Who had put a hand there? Who had made that mark? The memory of the bottle in Hannah's drawer flashed like a cut film through her head. Someone said, "We should call security." Another whispered, "Call the police." The words spun around Grace like a cyclone. She stood very still. Her fingers curled around the edge of the tray she had been holding, nails pressing into the silver. The house had rules, and one of those rules was that Vincent's word was law. To argue here would be to stand without support on a bridge that could break. But she could not walk away. "What would you do in my place?" she thought, not a real question, but a hard, bright one that landed like a challenge. Would you tell them the truth and hope they listen, or would you bow and let the world keep its neat order? Grace felt something else then, a small, stubborn heat under the ribs. This was no longer only about her job. It was about Elijah's small body on the floor, about a mark that had not been there before. It was about the bottle in Hannah's drawer and the tag on the horse. "I'm not leaving," she said. Her voice surprised her by not shaking. Heads turned. Vincent's mouth folded. For an instant, the house seemed to tilt. "You will leave," he said. Now, she stayed. They watched her like witnesses at an execution. She had a choice. She had a path that would cost her everything, and another that would cost her nothing but her pride. Outside, the gardener's lawn glowed under the late sun. Inside, the wooden horse lay forgotten on the rug. The chipped ear caught a sliver of light and looked, for a moment, like a tiny, bright door. Grace felt the room tilt under her feet, the air thick with expectation. Voices around her became small and distant. Someone muttered about lawyers. Someone else cleaned their throat like a judge preparing a sentence. Vincent stood a little forward, hands in his pockets, the man in control. He expected obedience. He had never met Grace's kind of stubbornness. Hannah's face was hard and unreadable for a moment. Then she did something Grace had not expected. Her shoulders dropped, as if the weight of the day had finally landed. "We should not make accusations without proof," she said quietly, not to Grace so much as to herself. The words sounded like a plea. Maria crossed the parlor as if she had to move and stopped beside Grace. Her hand brushed Grace's sleeve. It was a small, secret touch, one that said she would not stand alone. "He's only a boy," Maria said low. "We must be careful. We can see what happened." Her voice was steady enough to be a soft force. Mr. Connors cleared his throat. "We'll follow procedure," he said, which meant, "do what keeps the family safe." His eyes slid to Vincent like a man who knew which way the wind blew. Dr. Patel straightened his clipboard as if that alone could tidy the moment. Guests shuffled their shoes and tried to look interested in the cushions. People who had come to the house to be impressed now watched a spectacle they did not understand. Vincent's jaw tightened. "Grace," he said, "you will leave now. Security will escort you." He said it like a decree. She looked at him. The room seemed suddenly very small, and all the rules felt like a net. Grace could name everything she might lose: a job, rent money, a reference that might open other doors. She could also let this house's neat system swallow the truth. She remembered the chipped horse on the floor. She remembered the tag that said, "Do not remove," and the small bottle in Hannah's drawer. She thought of Matthew's cough and nights when no one with money had rushed in to fix things. She felt the locket warm against her chest, as if a small living thing could lend courage. "No," she said, short and clear, "I won't leave, not until someone checks the cameras and the child is looked at properly." The words were small but firm. Vincent leaned forward. "No one needs to play detective," he said. "Then call security and have them check the tapes," Grace answered. "Call whoever you need, but do not make me the scapegoat and walk away." Vincent blinked, unprepared for a domestic worker to demand procedure. The house had built itself on people taking orders. Grace's refusal made it wobble. Hannah swallowed. Her hands trembled only a little when she straightened a cushion. I can bring Elijah to the study," she said, away from guests. "We can examine him where it's quiet." Elijah sat hunched on the floor, eyes wide and raw from crying. He clutched the wooden horse like a prayer. Grace knelt, but kept a distance that would not frighten him, on the rug opposite him. She did not reach for him. She set her tray down slowly, as if lowering a bridge. "Hey," she said, voice soft, not a loud song but a hum that came from some remembered night. She tapped the edge of the tray with 2 fingers, a quiet rhythm. She did not move closer. She did not touch. She started to hum a tune that had been in her house when Matthew was small, a short, soothing line. It was the same tune her mother had hummed when coughs turned to long nights. Elijah's breathing hitched. He did not run. He did not rock as hard. For the first time since the vase fell, his hands relaxed a little on the horse. It was a small, fragile change, like the first leaf after a storm. Maria's eyes filled, and she stepped forward with a phone. "We need pictures," she said simply, and took a careful photo of the mark on Elijah's arm. It showed a faint red line, not dramatic but real. She saved it and looked at Grace with a question in her face. "What next?" "That's one thing," Grace said. Her mind moved into a plan as if a switch had flipped. "We photographed the mark. We collect the horse and its tag. We noted who was in the room the whole time." And she paused, then added quietly, "We looked in Hannah's station for the bottle I saw." Hannah's face went pale at that last sentence, shame or fear passing too fast for Grace to read. Mr. Connors moved like a man hearing thunder. "Wait," he said, "you don't search personal spaces." "We're not searching," Grace countered. "We're asking Hannah to show us what belongs to the child's care." There was truth in the words, and a manner that made Mr. Connors consider the optics. He was responsible for the estate's reputation. A public accusation without visible effort would be worse than a small private check. Dr. Patel cleared his throat. "A formal check is reasonable," he said, as if his clinical approval could make things safe. "We should document everything for Elijah's safety and the family." Vincent's face darkened, but even he could not publicly refuse a careful, documented path. He nodded once stiffly. "Fine. Do it quickly." Grace felt the room hold its breath. This was a small victory, procedural, tidy, bureaucratic, with real teeth. It was not justice yet, but it moved toward it. She felt the fragile warmth of hope. She made one more quiet, practical choice. "I will stay in the study while this is checked," she said. "I want to be here if Elijah needs calm." Her hands were empty. Her voice had no grand promise, only a simple fact. She would not run. Maria set the phone on the table and said, "I'll help." Her tone was a small pledge. Hannah, flustered and guilty, led Elijah away to the study with slow, careful steps, the wooden horse still clutched in his small fist. As they left, Grace's eyes slid to the horse and its tag. The object looked ordinary and stubborn, the same chip in its ear. She touched the locket under her shirt with 2 fingers, a private, steady ritual. Outside, the lawn glittered under a late sun. Inside, a plan was forming, simple, dangerous, necessary. Would you stand and ask for the truth, even if it costs you everything? Grace did, and that choice was a small thunder in a quiet house. Grace moved like someone collecting small weapons. She spoke quietly, clearly, so the guests heard nothing but the staff could. Photograph everything, she told Maria. Keep copies, put the horse in a clear bag. Don't let anyone touch the tag. Her words were a list and a promise. They followed. Maria photographed the mark again, close and steady. Mr. Connors wrapped the wooden horse in cling film with hands that trembled just a little. Hannah handed over the tiny paper tag without looking at Grace, as if the tag burned her fingers. Dr. Patel frowned and took notes, the kind of clinical penmanship that tried to make feelings into facts. Grace opened Hannah's small drawer, with Hannah watching like someone afraid to breathe. Inside lay a tidy row of small containers and a white bottle with a neat pharmacy label. The label read, ELDOLEY, for Elijah Hale low dose. The handwriting on the prescription was Dr. Patel's. Grace felt her mouth go dry. Why was this not logged? She asked, soft but sharp. Hannah's hands folded around themselves. Mr. Hale asked I give before guests, she said. Her voice was small and quick. He said it would help Elijah sit through visits. He said it was only a tiny dose. Her eyes filled with shame and fear. He told me not to tell anyone. I did what he asked. Grace's chest tightened. A small victory rose. There was now a paper trail, a bottle, and a confession that someone had medicated Elijah before the guests arrived. That was proof that the child had been given substances, proof that needed explaining. But alongside it, a dark question grew. Who had the authority to insist on secret medication? Was it Dr. Patel's clinical call or Vincent's private order? Show me any notes, Grace said, voice steady. Prescription, message, anything. Hannah handed over a crumpled printed memo with Mr. Connors's initials at the bottom and a single line, administrative approval for pre-event sedation when necessary. The initials matched Mr. Connors's signet on other papers. Mr. Connors paled. I signed because Mr. Hale asked. He said the words with a man explaining a storm. He insisted this was to avoid scenes. He said it was for the boy's good and for the family's reputation. For a moment, the room spun with small, sharp truths. The staff had been following orders. Orders had come down from the top. Grace felt a small vindication. Evidence now pointed not to a maid's thoughtless touch, but to a pattern of secret actions. It felt like proof moving into the light. She sent one photo to her brother Matthew with a short message. This is what I saw. He replied with a single line, get proof, don't lose yourself. His answer steadied her. The locket against her heart warmed like a small ally. How many times had she needed someone's short, hard counsel to find courage? Then Grace asked to see the security footage. It should be simple. The house was full of cameras that watched halls and corners like small, impartial gods. Mr. Connors led them to the security room, a cramped place full of screens and blinking lights. He brought a remote and called up the tape in the afternoon. At first, the footage played like a slow, impartial witness. Guests arriving, Vincent greeting them, Elijah playing. Grace watched, pulse steady. Then the moment she needed arrived, the seconds before the vase crashed. The screen showed a child startled. A guest reached out. The child ran. Hands followed. Then the feed stuttered. The screen flicked and the picture skipped forward by 30 seconds. Where the crucial seconds should have been, there was silence and a blue screen. Grace's heart hit her ribs. Pause, she whispered. Rewind, Mr. Connors pushed buttons. The cursor spun. There's a gap, he said, face sudden and white. The camera lost power for a minute. We'll check backups. Backups should exist. The house kept everything. Yet when they opened the archival drives, a blank folder stared back. The time in question was empty. Someone had either missed the backup or worse, removed it. The air in the room went cold. Dr. Patel frowned, the clinical mask slipping. Cameras can fail, he said, but his words sounded thin. Grace felt the rising shadow of something larger, a tidy, deliberate erasure. If footage had been removed, who had the access? Who wanted that minute gone? A guest muttered, "Security failure," and his tone carried the thought like a verdict. Grace looked at Mr. Connors. His hands trembled as if his steady order had cracked. "Is this sabotage?" she asked quietly. He swallowed. "I don't know," he said. His voice had the hollow of a man who had always signed papers and now saw the ink as blood. For a moment, there was silence, like a held breath. Then Hannah whispered, "He told me to keep things quiet. He said it would ruin them." Her words pointed a small, trembling finger toward the master of the house. Grace felt warmth and cold at once. The small victory, finding the bottle and the note, had flipped into something worse. The evidence showed a pattern of secret sedation authorized by men at the top, and the security footage had been tampered with or failed when Grace needed it most. Someone was covering tracks. A small plan formed in her head like a seed. They had photos. They had the bottle. They had Hannah's trembling confession and Mr. Connors's memo, but they lacked the video that would lock the story in public eyes. Without it, the wealthy could still shape meaning with lawyers and whispers. She put her hand under her shirt and touched the locket. Matthew's short message came back to her like a bell. "Don't lose yourself." She squared her shoulders and spoke, low and clear. "We will gather everything else, witness statements, medical notes. I'll write down the timeline." Her voice was small and resolute. A guest looked at her with new interest. Vincent watched from the doorway like weather waiting. Grace felt a quiet fury, a hard, necessary heat. The house could hide gaps, but it could not hide every truth. Not if people remembered names and saved photos and kept the chipped wooden horse wrapped in cling film. Outside the study window, a cloud moved over the sun. Inside, evidence had shifted the house's balance a little, but the missing video was a hole that smelled of danger. Who had reached into the past and taken a minute away? And why would they do that? They carried the sealed horse like a small relic. The cling film made soft crinkles as Maria set it on the study table. The tag, a thin square of paper, lay beside it, still printed with neat letters. "Sensory aid, do not remove." The house had rules about that tag. Now those rules looked like a thin shield. Grace watched every face. Mr. Connors had gone pale and tight, fingers worrying at his watch. Hannah's lips trembled. Dr. Patel hovered with an unsure professionalism that washed off like water. Vincent stood at the doorway, hands folded, like a man waiting for winter to pass. "We need to know what that tag recorded," Grace said. Her voice was low, steady. She had no right to order things in this house, but she spoke as if she owned a small truth. Mr. Connors swallowed. "We shouldn't," he began. "Then call the company that made the toy," Grace replied. "Someone who can safely check it, or let me open it with gloves. We have to hear what's on it." The urgency in her voice made him look at the others for cover. Dr. Patel surprised her. He stepped forward. "I can help. If there is a recording, it may show what stresses Elijah faced. We need clarity." His hands were small over the clasp of his clipboard. He sounded like a man pulling himself together. Hannah's face folded. "If it's in there, it's my fault," she whispered. The guilt was a small animal in her voice. They called the toy manufacturer. The woman on the phone said the tag should only have a basic sensor and a timestamp logger, nothing more. They asked Mr. Connors to bring the toy to a lab. He hesitated, then chose speed over caution. "We'll check it here first," he said. "If there's anything, we'll call them." His voice had an official ring that tried to cover the tremble. Grace watched as Mr. Connors lifted the cling film and with a pair of thin gloves, eased the tag free. The paper was brittle from the tape. Beneath the label there was a seam, the kind of seam you find where two careless hands have layered plastic. Mr. Connors, who had run contracts for 20 years, looked suddenly clumsy as a child unwrapping a fragile present. He pried. The tag opened like a small mouth. Inside, they found a tiny circuit board and a microSD slot. A card sat there, like a small secret coin. The room went quieter than it had been in hours. "Play it," Grace said, two simple words that felt like a rope thrown into water. Dr. Patel fetched a laptop from his bag with hands that did not stop shaking. Maria found an adapter in a drawer. Hannah watched the tiny card as if it could bite. Mr. Connor's mouth was a thin line. Even Vincent leaned forward, the statue moving. The audio file loaded and began. At first there was only white noise, the hum of air, a child's small breath, then a voice, low, certain, an unmistakable cadence. "Hannah," the voice said. "Give him the tiny dose before the guests. He'll be calmer. Do it quietly. Don't tell anyone." Vincent's name hit the room like a bell. Maria's hand flew to her mouth. Hannah's face went the color of old paper. The recording continued. Another voice closer, the precise, clipped tone of Mr. Connors, answered. "Understood. I'll sign the memo. No one will know." You could hear a pen scratch and a small, dry chuckle. Then a third voice, softer, clinical. "Make sure it's documented on the bottle as prescribed. It will cover our bases." The voice sounded like Dr. Patel's. Grace felt her chest tighten. The tape was small, literal proof. Vincent's voice had told Hannah to medicate Elijah. Mr. Connors had arranged the paperwork. Dr. Patel's voice made the plan sound technical. The triangle of instruction lay exposed. "No," Hannah's whisper broke. She covered her mouth with both hands and shuddered. He told me to. He said it would save us from a scene. He said he could handle it." Vincent did not speak. His jaw worked. The guests in the parlor shifted, their faces crossing from curiosity to something sharper, disgust, betrayal, fear. A woman who had been smiling at cocktails now folded her arms like armor. Dr. Patel's eyes met Grace's for a fraction of a second. Then he looked away. "I advised on dosage ranges," he said, and the words came out thin, a man trying to keep a mask in place. "But I did not instruct secret administration." Grace had seen that clinical distance before, the way trained people split facts from consequences. But the tape had a second whisper, a softer line under the main conversation. It was low and hurried, as if someone less sure was pleading. "Do it after he's asleep," the whisper said. "We can keep the cameras down. I'll take care of the footage." The color drained from Mr. Connor's face. "Who else is on that file?" he asked. Grace asked a different question. Why would anyone say they'd take care of footage? The words hung like a hook in the air. The room held its breath. For a small moment, Hannah was both the guilty woman and the frightened one who had been ordered. Dr. Patel's clinical armor showed a crack, pressure from above, perhaps contracts, perhaps a promise of opportunity. She could not know yet. And Vincent, the man who had everything, had been caught on record telling a nanny to drug his son so guests would not be disturbed. "Play it again," Vincent said, voice low and thin. They played the file twice. The evidence was stubborn. It was a voice, it was a plan. It was not the whole story, but it was heavy and sharp. Grace felt her hands tremble. She had wanted proof and now held it, as if she had reached into darkness and pulled out a live wire. The house had rules that benefited the powerful. The tape had shown a man bending those rules into secrecy. Outside, the sun slid behind a cloud. Inside, Grace realized the fight was no longer about a single irritated guest or a fired maid. It was about a parent who had used authority to control a child's body. It was about people at the top deciding what the child should feel. It was about lives small and human beneath the weight of reputation. She turned and met Elijah's eyes when Hannah opened the study door to peek. For a heartbeat, the boy was quiet near the doorway, the wooden horse still clutched to his chest. His gaze flicked to Grace as if noticing, then away. He did not smile, he did not run, he had not yet given trust, but he had not rejected her either. What would you do now? Grace wondered, as the tape played the last thin seconds, the whisper about erasing footage, the soft lie of "I'll take care of it." Would you shout? Would you go to the police with a little card and a recorded voice? Or would you move quietly, gather more, and make the truth undeniable? The question had no easy answer. The microSD sat on the table like a tiny, shining key. Outside the study, footsteps paused. Someone watched the doorway. The house had shifted, something in the balance had broken, and Grace knew the next move would change everything. They played the tape again, and the room felt smaller, like a glass jar with everyone inside. The recording hung in the air, blunt and simple. Vincent's face did not crumple. It tightened. He looked like a man hearing a verdict he would not accept. "You will apologize," he said to Hannah, voice cold as a blade. Now Hannah's hands shook. For a moment she looked at Grace with something like pity. Grace thought the woman might finally tell the whole truth. She had been honest earlier. She had handed over the bottle. Maybe Hannah would speak up and say it had been Vincent's order. Instead, Hannah turned away from Grace and toward Vincent. Her voice broke. "I'm sorry," she said. Her eyes filled. "I signed something. He said he would fire me if I told the guests. He said he'd take my son's schooling away. I was scared." Grace felt something in her chest break. She had known fear could make people lie. She had also trusted Hannah. The betrayal landed like a rock. "Grace touched him," Hannah continued, her words stumbling out as if someone else pressed them into her mouth. "She reached for him when he was upset. I tried to stop her. She had the bottle in her hand. I took it from her and put it in my drawer because I thought." She stopped, broke, and then said the one sentence that killed the room's patience. "I thought she was trying to help by giving him something." The parlor went very quiet. Guests who had been leaning into gossip now straightened like jurors. Mr. Connor's color ran out. Dr. Patel's face was a strange mask of clinical shock and relief. Vincent's hand closed around the back of a chair until his knuckles whitened. "You lied," he said to Grace. It was soft and simple and final. "Say it again." "Not true," Grace snapped. The single short line punched through the hush. For a second, her words landed like a small stone thrown at a window. But Hannah's statement had filled the air with an accusation. People understood an easy story. Rich man's son hurt, low-paid maid responsible. The world loves a tidy villain. Security arrived like a second, slower storm. They did not cuff Grace on the rug. A hand on her elbow led her toward the front door with practiced, polite efficiency. A guest whispered about charges. One walked outside to make a call as if the scandal needed a headline. Grace looked at Hannah as she walked past. The nanny avoided her eyes. Maria's face had gone white. Mr. Connors moved as if he had been trapped between coins and conscience. Dr. Patel kept his distance as if facts were contagious. They escorted Grace to the front steps, where the garden looked absurdly peaceful. A neighbor's child chased a ball in the sun. Life outside the gates continued as if the study had not just shattered. Grace's tray clattered and fell. A cup smashed at her shoe. No one stooped to pick it up. Someone murmured that a formal complaint would be filed. Vincent said he wanted a written statement and proof Grace had accessed medication. Hannah offered her signature. Mr. Connors promised cooperation. The wealthy had systems. Those systems closed around one person as easily as they opened for another. They told Grace she was fired. The word landed like a sentence. It meant rent unpaid, a lost job, a name in a list that would follow her. It meant the locket felt heavier, not lighter. Outside the gates, a security guard put a polite hand on her arm and said, "You can collect your things tomorrow." Grace felt the polite hand like a lock. Guests watched from windows, curiosity wrapped tight in silk. As they walked her to the gate, Grace's mind moved, quick and sharp. She had choices she had not expected to need. She could leave with her pride and nothing else. Or she could take one last, dangerous step. When she had knelt in the study earlier, she had seen the micro-SD card lying like a tiny coin beside the laptop. It had been the only solid proof beyond paper and the recording. She had a brief, clear thought. If the wealthy could burn a minute of footage, they could bury other small things too. If she wanted to fight, she needed more than a bottle and testimony. She needed something that could not be easily dismissed. As the guard opened the iron gate, Grace slipped her hand into her pocket and felt the locket. Her fingers touched something cold and small tucked beneath it. The micro-SD, stolen with a heartbeat and a quiet that felt like prayer. Taking it was risky. It felt like theft in a house where the wealthy could make laws about what their staff could and could not hold. She walked out anyway. Once on the sidewalk, the city breathed around her. Cars hummed. The sky was a washed blue. Grace looked back only once. The Hale house sat behind its trees, the place where she had been tested and where a betrayal had been sown. Her breath came quickly, her hands shook. She called Matthew on the bus ride home. He answered, breathless from a late shift but steady. "What happened?" he asked. "Everything," Grace said. She did not tell him the whole story. She did tell him this. She had the recording and the card. She sent one short message, "I need help." Matthew's reply was a single line, the kind of direct help he always gave. "Don't go anywhere, I'll be there." Lawyer first. It was the same kind of hard advice he had given when their mother was sick. It steadied her the way a hand can when you are slipping. For a few hours, Grace felt like she had nothing left. The city felt too loud. Her bag was lighter because the house had taken a few things, a uniform, a small cash advance. The world seemed ready to label her the villain. Witnesses who had once watched with sympathy now kept their distance. She sat on a bench and held the locket. The wooden horse image from it, Matthew's toy, came back as a sharp, small light. The horse had been wrapped in cling film on the study table, safe and silent. It was still proof. It was still a symbol. A tiny, ordinary thing that had shown what a powerful man would do. She had the micro SD now, a tiny key that might unlock more truth. But she had also been betrayed by someone she had trusted. Grace felt broken and furious all at once. She had lost nearly everything in a single afternoon. She had been shamed while the powerful circled their wagons. And then, as the sun leaned west, a new thing rose in her. The betrayal hurt, but it did not end her. She could let Hannah's lie erase the tape. Or she could use the small, dangerous card in her pocket, the photograph stored on Maria's phone, the memo from Mr. Connors, and the bottle label. She could gather witnesses who had seen the order given, who had heard the voices. She could bring the truth into a place where it could not be controlled by money and fear. She stood up from the bench. The city smelled of wet pavement and diesel. Her hands steadied. She put the micro SD into her palm and pressed it like a promise. They had taken her job and given her a lie. They had not taken her courage. What would you do if they tried to hide the truth? Grace tightened her grip and walked toward the bus stop, toward Matthew, toward a plan. Grace did not shout. She moved, quietly and precisely, the way people who have nothing left to lose learn to move. She met Matthew at the bus stop. He had the calm, clipped voice of someone who had stayed up all night reading legal forums. They found a small lawyer who took the case pro bono, an older woman named Claire who had a soft voice and a sharp hunger for righting wrongs. "Evidence," Claire said when they sat in her cluttered office. "Give me everything." Grace handed over the micro SD like an offering. She showed the photos on Maria's phone, the bottle label, Mr. Connors's memo, Hannah's trembling confession, and the recording they'd all heard in the study. Claire nodded, making a list with a pen that sounded like a gavel. They did not move fast because they wanted to, but because they had to. Claire called a child protection agency first. A caseworker arrived with a folder and a serious face. "We'll open an immediate inquiry," she said. "We'll also secure Elijah's records and make sure he sees a pediatrician independent of the estate." Her tone left no room for delay. Next they went to the police with copies of everything. A detective with tired eyes took notes and did not smile at Vincent's lawyers when they later tried to call the matter a misunderstanding. "We have probable cause to investigate," he said, simple and blunt. That phrase had power because it carried the weight of the state. Grace watched the tiny pieces of proof become real things in official hands. The micro SD was analyzed by a state lab. The recorded voices were authenticated. Maria signed a formal statement. Hannah, after long nights of guilt and fear, met with the detective and cried while telling everything, how she had been ordered, how she had feared losing her own child's schooling, how fear had made her blame the wrong person. Her confession was not a neat absolution. It was messy and human. "I was scared," she said, again and again. "I'm sorry." The first big public moment happened not in a courtroom, but at a press meeting. Claire stood at a microphone, Grace at her side, Matthew with his jaw tight. A local reporter asked, "What do you want people to know?" Claire looked at the crowd and said, "We want the truth to matter more than power." The cameras rolled. Vincent's team rushed to protect him. Lawyers sent letters. A PR agent tried to soften his words on television. He issued a statement of regret for the disturbance and promised cooperation with investigators. But the tape, the bottle, the memo, and the witnesses were a net too wide to mend with crafted phrases. The story spread not because Grace wanted it to, but because facts had weight. A days-long investigation led to a formal inquiry into secret medication and tampering with security. The detective's face had been stern when he told Vincent he was a person of interest. "You will answer questions under oath," he said, and Vincent's usual control did not cover the legal world. The same scrutiny touched Dr. Patel. His notes showed odd prescriptions and unusual orders. He tried to say he had advised clinically, but the tape and the pharmacy label argued otherwise. Courtroom scenes were brief but sharp. Testimony was given by Maria, by Mr. Connors, who, when faced with his own memo and the recording, confessed he had been pressured by Vincent and feared the consequences of refusal, and by Hannah, who told the judge she had acted out of fear for her job and family. Her betrayal was not erased, it was exposed and made part of the truth. "I was wrong," she said in open court, voice small. "I am sorry." Grace sat through the hours with her hands folded. She did not look for sympathy. She had wanted only one thing, that Elijah be protected and that a powerful man not use secret measures to control a child's body. The judge listened, the papers were read, the evidence played. "Not today," the judge said quietly when Vincent's attorney tried to claim there was no wrongdoing. The room stirred. The final legal outcome was not a fairy tale. Vincent faced charges related to administering drugs without proper consent and for interfering with security systems. Investigations into Dr. Patel's practices were opened. Mr. Connors faced professional consequences and agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. Hannah was not imprisoned. She entered a program for witnesses and was required to assist in building the case. The court ordered changes to Elijah's care. An independent guardian was appointed. The child was evaluated by specialists outside the estate, and strict oversight was put in place. The judge's ruling included a clear statement: money is not permission. Publicly, Grace's name was cleared in a formal statement. In the hearing room, partially full of people who had once gossiped, several witnesses apologized to her in small, awkward ways. "I'm sorry," one woman murmured. It did not erase the firing, the humiliation, or the weeks of shaking fear, but it was a small human writing. Elijah did not stand and declare gratitude. Children do not wrap up stories neatly. But things changed. The wooden horse was returned to him after a proper cleaning. In a quiet moment, months later, he walked into a small room where Grace sat with her hands folded. He placed the horse, now with a new scratch, a map of the day, on her knee. He did not speak. He did not need to. Grace ran her thumb over the worn paint and felt a softness that was not pity but connection. The horse had been a door. Now it was a marker of how small things can hold truth. She thought of the first morning she had held out her hand in the hall and how different the house felt then. The world had slapped her down and then lifted her in odd, legal ways. "Thank you," she said to no one and everyone, though Elijah only watched the window light. His eyes were quieter. He let someone else brush his hair without pulling away. It was small. It was huge. Grace did not get all she wanted. She did not get the loyalty of everyone who worked in the house. Hannah's betrayal left a scar, but she did get a kind of justice. The system noticed, witnesses spoke, and a child was no longer treated as a convenience. At the final hearing, the judge closed with a line that stayed with Grace: "Power is a responsibility, not a right." It echoed like an instruction. On a late afternoon, Grace walked through the city to a small cafe. Matthew sat opposite her and smiled, tired but steady. "So?" he asked. "What now?" Grace touched the locket, then the wooden horse in her bag, the one Maria had given her for safekeeping. She lifted it and looked at it like a talisman of a life that had been nearly broken. "We keep our hands gentle," she said. "We keep our eyes open. We help when we can." She looked into Matthew's face. "And we don't let silence decide for someone else." Outside, a child ran past, laughing. Grace watched him and thought of Elijah. The house had taught her a hard lesson, that some people use power to hide. The law had pushed back. But the real change lived in small human things: an apology, a clean toy, a child who no longer flinched at a hand. "What do you take from that?" she thought, without asking the crowd. Don't let reputation touch the truth. Don't let fear make you lie. Don't let money decide a child's body. The wooden horse sat on the cafe table like a small, stubborn truth, worn, ordinary, and unshakable. If you found this story powerful, make sure to hit that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Your support helps us bring more important stories to light.